Well, I suppose, oh, I'm so sorry. I suppose I should begin by telling you the motivation behind this starting from zero project. The first one is very simple. It seemed to me after 4 years, and I showed you all the flimsies on day one, that there was something tremendously arrogant about one academic organizing these meetings, coming up with recommendations, endorsing them, without having any experience on the ground at all. So that was reason one. Get some experience. Know what you're talking about. Inspiration two came very much from Kate, because I like her approach, I like her groundedness, I like the basic everydayness of it, and I like the objective, which is my objective too, of helping these victims become ordinary members, the kind of members that they wish to be, of the local community, civil society, wherever it is geographically that they want to be. And meeting people like Alicia, who have broken many years ago now, who have broken through this barrier successfully to write poetry and books and so on, was a huge incentive. It can be done. And reason three was something about the Catholic Church, not just the leadership of Papa Francisco, which has been marvelous, but also the recognition that we have an asset in our global network of dioceses, parish churches, parish meeting rooms, congregations, which any network analyst in social science would give their hearts for. And yet we don't use it. We don't use it fully. So part of the idea was also, so this is number three, to turn a passive parish into an active parish. Because mention was made yesterday about the 3 days we spend celebrating or commiserating both with trafficked people. And I noticed in my own locality, which is the Midlands in England, sort of Birmingham, Coventry, Oxford Triangle, if you like, that not one mention was made of any of those 3 days in any of the parish churches, and there are about 6 of them. So, okay, what am I going to do about it? Well, a professor of my age is not broke. So I bought a small 2 bedrooms, 2 downstairs rooms, terraced house built for workers in the late 19th century. Nothing special. You could make it very pleasant, and it was actually very pleasant. Now, then came the first problem. It's a problem anybody starting up anywhere has to contend with. It's the state of the local law in that place, wherever it may be. It will be different, but it will be constraining. Might be enabling to some extent, but it's more constraining. And this was that, and you can try this experiment for yourselves. You type in Google, family or person, or I am willing to house 2 trafficked persons. And of course your question is, how do I go about it? And Google will chuck you up endless charities that do endless good works, and I'm not knocking them for 1 second, but they won't tell you anything specific about trafficking. They won't give you a roadmap, who to ring, where to go, who will advise you. I was lucky in having this framework, and Kate in particular, because that was of more local relevance than anywhere else, to do this and to be able to break through that barrier. deficient, as I personally believe, the national referral mechanisms actually are in Britain. So, yes, I hit the same problem. The parish was generous in terms of physical resources and giving. It's always been good at that. And it was very easy to furnish the house quite attractively and with everything you would need. But I had to go back to the national referral mechanism, to the first stage carers, and one of the, is it 7 on the list, Kate? 7 first stage carers on the NRM list? Was it 9? Don't know. Anyways, went to one of them, doesn't matter. And I was very glad to get there because I'd had an empty house. I mean, can you imagine anything worse? We're in the middle of the asylum seeker crisis. My government was not the best at responding to it, certainly not the most generous. For 4 months it stood furnished but empty. But eventually, one of these rather good charities responded and said, would I take 2 trafficked women and a child each? Gladly, if you think they're suitable. Not much information to be had. But on November the 3rd, the first day we started this conference, they have been in the house for exactly 1 year. Now, Aduni, these are all pseudonyms, obviously. They're both Nigerian, but one is Igbo, the other is Yoruba, by tribal ancestry. Aduni have been trafficked into Britain specifically at the age of 9 into domestic servitude, which she personally guaranteed in her statement to the Home Office involved no sexual abuse whatsoever. Or in her words, he never touched me. This is the father of the family. She was looking after 6 people, 7 if you include her, herself, cooking, washing up, fetching them from school, doing the washing, the mending, etc., etc. On the go from morning till night, not allowed to go to school. So, as she says herself, she was largely taught English through television. And Yagazi, who was trafficked from Lagos to somewhere in Germany, sex trafficked. Somebody got wind of this. The traffickers were quite technically sophisticated and moved her overnight to the Netherlands. More suspicion, she was moved over another night to Britain. And there they both are in the same legal status to which Kate referred. There are reasonable grounds for deeming them trafficked persons, but neither of them have obtained conclusive grounds for that from the Home Office, which would mean that they had the right to work and the right to remain. So they're in a dreadful limbo where they cannot access anything, where they have no rights whatsoever, and where, in effect, the government has passed the whole burden of doing anything for them to the voluntary sector or the third sector. Were it not for the third sector, goodness knows what would have happened. They are literally out there in the streets, back on the streets, in the gutter, as we say colloquially. So, how did we cope? Because the next problem was recruiting from your generous local church people who are willing to be volunteers, meaning not giving objects or money, but giving something of themselves and their time. Now, this is very interesting indeed, because many people were sort of willing, but very uncertain that they were the right kind of person to do this. So older retired people would say, well, you know, I used to teach, but, you know, I'm late 70s, early 80s, I'm retired. You know, doesn't stop you sitting and reading with a young child, does it? I said, well, no. And, you know, the final resort was to say, befriending is a gift in itself. To listen, to be friendly, to stay if they manifestly wanted you to stay, to go if they clearly wanted you to go, because you are there to serve them. You're not there to satisfy yourself. That was one problem. The very old, they turned out to be a wonderful asset, incredibly generous, and particularly since most of them still drove cars. And bus fares are a major issue. They're expensive. So just to get the kids to the park being free, was an expense that they couldn't afford. They were getting 55 euros a week for a mother and a child. They couldn't even afford public swimming. And it took a lot of negotiation to get them into Coventry, the nearest big town to our small historic town, for the college itself to give them bus fare money to get in. Now, this is all about negotiation because they had no rights to education, training, or anything. The college actually turned out to be very good, but it had to abide by the national curriculum, which insisted that if you want to do things like become a carer, which somebody mentioned this morning, then you have to have the first level qualifications in English and maths. Now, that sounds minimalistic. Actually, it involves 3 days in college, 6 lots of bus fares, and that's if they don't charge you fees. Now, they have no right to remission of fees, so all that has to be negotiated and was. They have some rights if they fall in certain rather arbitrary age brackets, which one of the girls in question didn't. And so, you know, that took a lot of time and a lot of doing. Then we have the problem of, well, what is their civil status? Now, Yeduni had been through an oral Yoruba marriage to a very decent young guy who considered himself to be her husband and her child's father, was willing to take any responsibilities, but the Home Office had linked his case to her case, and so there was very little he could do other than be around occasionally, otherwise he counted as an illegal migrant. And the bottom line is that 5 years went by, and at the end of it, what did Yetuni have to show, other than the fact that she got 3 lawsuits on her hand, one with the Home Office, one with the police station, which had lied cold-bloodedly and said she had never been on their books, and which had messed up her case for the right to remain by missing out on a lot of legal evidence that John helped me identify. So forming this small charity wasn't so easy. All sorts of circumstantial things came in the way. They arrived November the 3rd, as I've said. Of course, it being a nice congregation, it showered them with presents. And then Yetuni's 1-year-old, reached her first birthday, another shower of presents. Then Christmas, another shower of presents. Now, this was having very negative effects. We were breeding a dependency culture that you only had to ask and you got given. And this was just not good for anybody. And that took some getting out of and some explanation. And just to finish up on, okay, the paper's there because I won't have time to go into where we went right and where we went wrong. So the point I'll finish on is trust is not a commodity. It's not something you just dump on people like a present or take off people. Trust is something you generate by living together and working together. And this is what it took with them. So we didn't ask them for voice straight away. I regard this as intrusive. Let them start to tell you bit by bit what they are ready to tell you. You have no rights to be a voyeur into their past history. Eventually, they will tell you, but let it be in their own good time, not us turning as volunteers, turning into another kind of dominant interrogator, and let them, I mean, I did like the idea of the Book of Dreams, but dreams actually have to be nurtured by the individual. And it was very, very good indeed to see that as they slowly relaxed, and this took 6 months, and that was 6 months learning for us, they will not be able to articulate, what do I want to do in life? They don't know enough about the place. They don't know enough about themselves today. They don't know how demanding childcare is upon them. But yes, from about 6 months onwards, but you know, that was where we went wrong. We were impatient rather than patient. From about 6 months on, they started to tell us what they thought. And just like any of our own children who, you know, what do you want to do when you grow up? You know, the old grandmother's question. Or what do you want to study at university? The parental question. They have to feel their way, and they may get it wrong at first, or decide it's too expensive or too long. But gradually it clarifies, and then you can help them clarify further because you know what to look for. So I'll finish there because I don't think these are ever finished stories when you can say, oh, great, you know, mission accomplished, on to the next lot. These are living people, living dreams, living mistakes, and half of those mistakes at least are the ones we make, not the ones they make. Thank you.